I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times. Welcome to the New York Times Close Up. Now that Election Day has passed, we no longer have to see the commercials, listen to the attacks, but there are fundamental issues that beg for real scrutiny. For New Yorkers, one is the tax code, revisions that could cost us dearly. In a moment, Kathryn Wylde, President and Chief Executive of the Partnership for New York City, gives us a grim outlook. Then This Land columnist Dan Barry tells us about the lost children of a small village in Ireland. The essay in last week's New York Times captured our hearts. We'll also see an excerpt from the Times video journalist Kassie Bracken's accompanying documentary from nytimes.com. My Times colleagues discuss the week's most interesting events on The Backstory, and I'll add some final thoughts on Coda. But first, Kathryn Wylde, President and Chief Executive of the Partnership for New York City, representing the city's business leadership. Kathy, we're talking about ending deductibility of state and local taxes on your federal returns. Congress considering this over the next couple of weeks. What would that mean for New Yorkers?
Well, deductibility of our state and local taxes is an important piece of the package that makes New York affordable, because rather than double taxing us on paying taxes on both our income and on the taxes that are deducted from our income, we'd be sitting in a situation where our taxes would go up in terms of the tax payments would go up as much as 40%.
And how would that affect rich people in New York? Do they get hit disproportionately, or?
Yes, it is a progressive hit, but single household earning over $100,000, a family earning over $200,000 will get hit. And they will get hit significantly. And
that is considered middle class in New York, practically.
Absolutely, it's middle class. And even at the high end, the differential between going to Florida or Texas, where there are no income taxes, and paying full freight in New York, where the state and local is 13%, is a big difference. It's a big competitive disadvantage for New York.
And what impact will it have on businesses either staying here or planning to locate here?
Well, there's two factors that are being developed in the tax bill. So one is good for New York, a reduction in corporate taxes, which are now 35%. The proposal in the House is to put that down to 20%. That's good for business. New York is the business capital of America. Right now, we're not competitive. London, every city in the world, really, but London's our most direct competitor, has lower corporate taxes. So the tax reduction on the corporate side is good. On the other hand, the plan, at least coming out of the House of Representatives, the plan to pay for that is to basically raise taxes in effect on New York, California, New Jersey, other high tax states, by eliminating something that we've had for many generations, the deductibility.
Since the income tax passed, in fact.
Since the deductibility of state and local taxes. And that would be devastating for New York, more than any other state, really. We send $48 billion a year more to Washington than we get back in all the federal programs already. And this would simply add to that.
In terms of corporations, they presumably, or perhaps will have to pay their employees more to make up the difference, but they will save more on the corporate tax cuts.
Right. Corporations are doing the calculation. They'll get a tax reduction. At the same time, many of their employees will get a tax increase. And some are saying we have to make that up. And they're basically looking at the difference. We'll see what comes out of the Senate plan, but so far it's a tough calculation. I mean, it puts corporations in a bad spot because it's good for them and for the shareholders, but it's not good for some of the employees.
Kathy, I went back and looked at 1986 when this issue came up again, and there was Lou Rudin, Jay Kriegel, David Rockefeller, Al D'Amato, Pat Moynihan, the leaders of the business and political community, labor, banding together and virtually marching on Washington and saying, you can't do this. And in fact, they won pretty much. Where are all these people now?
Well, for the most part, there certainly is a concerted concern, but it's been unclear. We've only seen the details of this plan. I mean, the House plan came out, a week ago? The Senate plan is not out yet. It's supposed to come out today. So we really haven't seen the details of the plan and known how exactly it would affect us. We certainly, at the Partnership for New York City, we went to the White House and Congress in April and started arguing against this mano a mano with the leadership of the White House, the Senate, and the House. We had very little impact. This is really a political call. The states that are impacted, the high-tax states, are Democrat voting states. They're blue states. The loss of the Health Care Act means that the Republicans that have the majority in Congress and the White House really need a victory, and a corporate tax reduction is the one they're looking for. We have not done that this time. This is a pure reduction on the corporate side, and to pay for it, we're talking about the elimination of state and local tax deductibility, which is worth $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years.
Is there a critical mass of people that could be assembled as there was in 1986?
Well, at this point, the timing is short. We're not sure if this is going to pass or not. But if we get corporate tax reform or tax reduction, which we want, they've got to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And so there's only, till the end of the year is the schedule. Some are saying before Thanksgiving, but probably till the end of the year that they're going to be negotiating this. So there's very little time. There is not the kind of coalition of business and labor that we had in the 80s, in 1986. I think in part that's because there's not generally a political coming together in the city or the country. We're sort of polarized every place right now.
Thanks to Kathryn Wylde of the New York Partnership for joining us. And when we return, the Times' This Land columnist Dan Barry on the lost children of Tuam. Welcome back. Joining me now, one of our very gifted writers, Dan Barry. Last week, he displayed his heart and talent in The Lost Children of Tuam, which became a section unto itself in the New York Times. The children were lost until one housewife made it her mission to uncover the cruel truths that literally lay beneath her feet. New York Times video journalist Kassie Bracken accompanied the story with a stunning video. We'll see an excerpt. You can see the whole thing on nytimes.com. Dan, how did you and Kassie come across this story?
Well, my mother was born about 40 miles from where this took place in County Galway, Ireland. So I kind of knew the story. It broke back in 2014 in one way. And then in March of this year, the suspicions of this housewife, Kathryn Wylde, were confirmed by some excavation and analysis, that indeed there were the remains of children ages fetal to 3 years in the grounds of this property.
And why were they there in this home for sort of abandoned children?
Right, it's a home called the Mother and Baby Home, and they were established in the early 1920s in Ireland to take in and rehabilitate unwed mothers and to raise their children up to a certain age, usually to first communion, about 7 years old, after which those children, they would not stay with their birth mothers, but rather they would either be fostered out, adopted, or sent to an industrial school, which is sort of like a Dickensian Oliver Twist
workhouse
program, right?
And what happened to them?
Well, it was this particular home was financed by the county and state governments in Ireland, but it was managed by a religious order of nuns, the Bon Secours. And so over the course of time, many of these children died, hundreds. Now they died, perhaps there was issues of prenatal care, but also possibly care after birth, improper care, inappropriate or neglectful care. And so these children were dying of gastroenteritis and marasmus, which is malnutrition, and other diseases that sometimes would go through a ward and infect these children, and they would die by the dozens a year sometimes.
And presumably with proper care, they could have been saved?
Presumably, yeah. And certainly the Irish government will admit that the regulatory aspect of this, that being the Irish government checking on what was going on in these homes, because it was one of many around Ireland, was inadequate.
Let's take a look at that video from Kassie Bracken at nytimes.com.
I remember the children at school just vaguely, and I do remember they were segregated from the rest of us. We weren't allowed to play with them. These were like a different species at the time.
My mother got pregnant outside of marriage, and of course that was a big sin. And the priest in the parish got to hear about it and told her parents that it was an awful disgrace, that she couldn't be seen out because she'd be a bad influence. So they told her then that when the baby is due, that she was to be taken to Tuam, the home in Tuam, and the nuns will look after her there. Then they opened the door and told her she'll have to leave. And she said, I want my son. And they just closed the door on her face. And every week then she would walk from the centre of Tuam out the Dublin Road every week for 5.5 years, knocking on the door. I want to take my son out there. That's my son you have in there. I want to rear him. I want to look after him. And they said, no, he's got to be fostered out. And that was it.
I have no memories of it. I was there for 4.5 years.
There was a hedge each side of us and a crowd of us walking. That's the only memory I have.
I thought I was an animal at one stage. I used to get dreams at night that I was growing horns. And when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do, such a sigh of relief.
There was no love, there was no care. What happened in the home? You know, it can happen to you, that you can block things out at such a young age.
I suppose at the back of my mind, it was there in the subconscious, wondering about the children. I thought it would be just a simple history, the history of the Bonscore sisters and how they worked and how they operated. I thought I'd go to the local library and thought I'd get a volume of information on the home to work on. There was absolutely nothing. So I went to the local people. I said, that's the best way to find out information. And locals were a bit hesitant to say, oh, the poor little children in there, so, you know, they were treated badly. An odd person to tell you, they remember screaming in the home. It was still very much a hush-hush affair. But I was gathering all this information in the back of my mind and getting a picture. And it was only then I got the story of, back in the 1970s, that the two boys found bones of children in a tank.
I've often thought about it afterwards, like, you know, what did we come across? Like, it was a chamber, a H chamber, you know, and the amount of bones that were in it, there was a good few. Like what we came across in 1972 was reported, and the government knew about it, but yet they didn't do anything about it.
This whole story wouldn't get out of my head, so I had to follow it. I had to determine who was buried there. First of all, of course, I asked the Bonscore sisters, and they said they had no knowledge or no records whatsoever of any burial in the home. And got on to the county council who owned the land then, and they had no records of burials either. So I wondered then, my thoughts went then to how many children actually died in the home. That's an inspector's report for the Tuam home from 1947. It shows the condition of the babies and toddlers, and it makes very harrowing reading. You have a 13-month-old baby in the care of Bonscore sisters who are a nursing congregation. You have a miserable, emaciated child with voracious appetite and no control over body functions, probably mentally defective. Wizened limbs, 3 months old, wizened limbs. 3 weeks old, emaciated and delicate. Now, that was the Excel copy of the deaths of the babies and children.
Dan Barry, you wrote that you thought you were a natural for this story. Why, and did you turn out to be?
I don't know, that might still be an open question, but because my mother grew up in rural Ireland, in Galway in particular, I kind of knew some of the nuances of the culture. It was part of my own culture. And I was at ease in the homes of that woman, for example, Kathryn Wylde, and at ease with talking to some of the adult home babies, they're called. So I guess I was a natural in understanding the language, even though it's English, understanding the language.
And why weren't the babies just buried normally?
We don't know. And so what happened was this home closed in 1961, and then many years later, this woman wanted to look into the history of that home. And so she found the death certificates for close to 800 children, but she couldn't find the burial records for these children. And that's what led her eventually to discover that at least some, if not all, are buried in the grounds of the home. The home has been since demolished, and now there's housing on it. So it's a big issue in Ireland. What do you do with this property? You know, it's not a consecrated ground. And also, many of these children were baptized. So if you're baptized in the Catholic faith, you're entitled to burial in consecrated ground. And one would argue this was not consecrated.
Fascinating story. You can read it at nytimes.com. Also see Kassie Bracken's video. My thanks to This Land columnist Dan Barry, the New York Times, for joining me. Please read The Lost Children of Tuam if you haven't done so already. You can find it online at nytimes.com, along with Kassie Bracken's documentary. The backstory is next. Welcome back. An interesting week for all of us. The president continued his mission to eat only steak and burgers, no matter where he went in Asia. His support of the Republican candidate Ed Gillespie in Virginia didn't go quite as planned, and he blamed Gillespie. Mayor de Blasio won re-election easily. Where does he go from here? Joining us to discuss these stories and more, my Times colleagues, contributing writers Clyde Haberman and Eleanor Randolph, and City Hall Bureau reporter William Neuman. Welcome to all of you. The mayor said this is going to be a fairer city, the fairest city of them all. It sounded like Sleeping Beauty. How is he going to make it the fairest city, Willie? And how are we going to know that it's the fairest?
Well, all good questions. I mean, it's not a new theme for him. It's just sort of somewhat repackaged. He's always talked about fairness and equality and
Tale of Two Cities.
Exactly. So things he's already done, pre-K, 3K, his idea is that that helps level the field and saves money for families that used to have to pay for childcare or nursery school. But how do we measure? He was asked yesterday, the day after the election, you know, how will we know when we get there, and what do you think is the fairest city now if it's not us? And he gave one of his very sort of typical dismissive answers. So
he was not very gracious in victory,
he was not gracious. He was prickly and strangely sort of, but at the same time gauzy. He talked about, you know, being the fairest of them all, and we will reach our highest height. The way I saw it is that he was simultaneously patting himself on the back, thumping his chest, and blowing his own horn, which is an interesting demonstration.
Did he get a mandate, and what does a mandate mean?
Well, what did he be?
Frankly, I mean, yeah. I mean, you win, you got a mandate. George Bush did not even win the election in the popular vote. Ditto Trump, and they both claim mandates. You know, it doesn't really mean very much. My concern for him would be the way he was sounding the day after the election, very reminiscent of 2013 and then early 2014, where he kept making one dumb mistake after another, as I think in candid moments he would admit, you know, in terms of showing up late all the time, in terms of showing up late to a memorial service, which is really bad news, calling the cops, the high-level police, because of a minister friend of his got stopped correctly for a broken taillight and so on. Boy, do we not want to have a repeat of that.
Well, you know, you asked about going forward. And to me, the thing he's really going to have to do is deal with Andrew Cuomo and figure out, probably more important than Cuomo, how to deal with the independent Democrats there in the state Senate. You know, the last time he tried to elect a Democratic Senate, it backfired on him, and that was one of the reasons that Albany only gave him 1 year control of the schools at a time. But, you know, if he wants, he talks about this millionaire's tax, the question of revenue for the city is going to become very intense, especially if this tax bill becomes law out of Washington. Cities and states are going to be punished. This is an anti-city administration and an anti-city Republican Party in
with
Washington.
a president from the biggest city.
And he's been very fortunate also because he's had a lot of money to do the things he wanted to do.
Bloomberg
Now,
left him a lot of money.
both in federal budgeting and other pressures, for instance, in tax changes, suddenly money is taken away from him. He's going to have to triage his budget, and he's not going to be able to do a lot of what he had hoped to, and that's going to be a totally different dynamic for him.
And the local economy has been very, very good on his watch. As we all know, it doesn't stay that way forever.
That's right. The Constitutional Convention resoundingly defeated. Is there any likelihood the legislature is going to impose any ethics reforms on its own?
No. But you know, we discussed this I think last week. The chicken and egg argument of, you know, do these people fail the electorate or the electorate fail New York democracy? They keep returning these guys, 98% of them, and if they start doing, you know, to put it crudely, throwing the bums out, maybe there would be some change. There needs to be some leaning on people. You know, there's a tendency to think that wisdom resides in voters, and I'm not persuaded of that very often. And the fact that only 25% again of us turned out on Tuesday or less is discouraging in the extreme.
One thing that was fascinating, as Eleanor pointed out earlier, is in the race for Manhattan District Attorney, the write-in vote accounted for about 9%.
Right.
That's right. Well, you know, I mean, it just reminds you, you cannot have a candidate sitting there alone without any competition, even if it's somebody you think is just purer than the driven snow. So that, you know, I'm sorry that Vance did not have some kind of competition out there, and people really, to respond with 9%, that is huge. And I hope he takes it on board that he's got to watch out about taking money from lawyers, about how his cases are paid for. How his campaign is paid for by people who actually have cases in front of him. He can't have that, and he said he wasn't going to do it, but he's really going to have to clean that up better.
He says he's reviewing policies, so we'll have to see what he produces, but indeed it is a big problem. On the other hand, who else is going to contribute to a DA's race except a lot of lawyers? And to some
want
degree,
access.
Well, they want access, but you can also argue that, you know, they're professionals. You can give them some high-mindedness that they want to have somebody they consider a decent person in this very, very responsible job. And well, there is legitimacy to that argument, but it does certainly raise problems, as we saw in a case involving Harvey Weinstein and some others. So,
Willie, the race for the council speakership, does it matter anymore since the mayor's been reelected?
I think it matters a great deal because the mayor would like to have a docile, manageable council, and you know, there's certain people in the council who would like to push back against the mayor, especially now that he's, you know, he's a 4-year lame duck, and there's ambitions within the council. So, you know, it could make things more interesting if there's somebody who is not completely an ally of the mayor.
Thanks to my Times colleagues, Clyde Haberman, Eleanor Randolph, William Neuman, for joining us, and I'll be back for some final thoughts with Coda. What happened in Sutherland Springs, Texas last weekend is just another reminder of the danger New Yorkers will face if Congress passes pending gun legislation. The bill would cause another massacre, but it would gut local controls and let people from states like Texas with weak gun laws, states that routinely grant gun permits to people convicted of violent crimes and where people can buy guns without background checks, to come to New York and legally carry concealed weapons. They could carry guns in bars and in schools. If you were denied a concealed carry permit here, you could go to another state, get a weapon, return home, and legally carry it in New York. Guns account for about 7 in 10 murders in New York. Most guns used to commit crime here come from other states. But because of New York's tough gun laws, the state still ranks 3rd lowest in firearm death rates. Gun fatalities in this country are about to surpass deaths from car crashes. One reason is that we began treating vehicular safety as a public health crisis. The government required safety features that slightly increased costs and inconvenience, but they did not infringe the right to drive. Since then, fatal auto accidents have been declining. In 2013, New York State passed even tougher background checks for gun and ammunition buyers. The number of violent crimes committed with a firearm has decreased. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said, "The problem with poor people is they don't have money." Similarly, he said, one problem with gun control is that we already have too many guns. While Congress was chewing on gun control, he bit the bullet, suggesting that we heavily tax and regulate the sale of ammunition instead. The specter of more federal regulation has not been raised by advocates of the proposed concealed carry reciprocity bill, even though individual states have imposed their own singular gun safety solutions. Take Arizona. In 1881, the town of Tombstone required anyone entering town to leave their weapons with the local sheriff. In 1970, that law was gutted by the state, which lifted most gun regulations. 2 years ago, though, in one of those annual Wild West reenactments of historic gunfights, a gun was accidentally loaded with real bullets instead of blanks. An actor playing an outlaw actually shot and wounded a tourist and a fellow actor posing as a deputy sheriff. Tombstone, which survives thanks to tourism, responded vigilantly. The stage shootings were temporarily halted. Town officials imposed strict controls, but only on fake gunfights. Since then, the annual reenactments have resumed, and no one else has been wounded. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.